Shalom and welcome to another episode of the Two Jews, 10 Opinions podcast. I'm Ailee Shanes.
And I'm Levi D'Amato.
We are so excited to welcome you back to the Two Jews, 10 Opinions podcast. I know it's been a while. Me and Levi have been on a winter break hiatus for the holidays. And so, yeah, Levi, just tell me a little bit about your holiday break.
My break? I mean, it was pretty good. I went to South Florida. I went to Miami I can't remember the last time I went, 2 years ago or something. I actually really enjoyed it a lot more this time than I did in the past.
It was really nice seeing you in South Florida.
Yeah,
we hung out
at Lincoln Road.
Lincoln Road, yeah. It's a really good place. It's nice to, honestly, I haven't been to Lincoln Road in a while, so it's nice that you got me out of my comfort zone a little bit, dragged me out there.
Amazing, yeah. But now we are back. It's been, like you said, like a month, and a lot has happened. Today, I didn't realize this today, but today is actually 100 days since October 7th. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot to unpack, and it's been a while since we've done the podcast. So we have a lot to talk about. We also have a special guest on this podcast, Eliza Greenwald. Would you like to introduce yourself, Eliza, and kind of explain your reasons for coming on today?
Sure. Okay, my name is Eliza, and I'm a junior, and I study political science at UF. And I feel like since I'm a Jewish student at UF, I have a lot of opinions about what's going on right now, and I think that this is a great platform to discuss them and have people listen to my thoughts.
Got you. And can you kind of just give me a rehash of, what your reaction was after October 7? Because it's been kind of a while since then, and I kind of wanted to because I don't know if we spoke when it exactly happened,
Yeah. Okay, so obviously I was shocked when it first happened, but my immediate reaction was less worry because I think we all immediately kind of think, are we safe here? Because that was my immediate reaction, was how are people going to react in America and on college campuses? And actually my first worry was about my sister because she goes to NYU. And the way that their administration has reacted has just been very different from us. So I feel very safe here, and I think that obviously I was in shock, but I was more concerned about my family's safety and how my sister feels. And since she's a freshman at NYU, she actually didn't want people knowing that she's Jewish, and she was trying to cover it up and just hide her identity from other people. And I think my initial reaction was just if my family is safe and if everyone's okay and feels comfortable where they are and being Jewish.
So did you immediately off the bat, you kind of knew that there was going to be a really negative reaction around the country? Because I was kind of naive. And you can also jump in, Ailee, what you thought, but I would have expected there would have been a lot more sympathy immediatily after, even despite what we've seen in past years, just because of how much worse this October 7 was.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought it would go like this, right? I thought kind of these pro-Palestinian accounts, organizations, whatever, would be we strongly condemn what Hamas did on October 7th. But then they would be however, there's still a lot of issues pertaining to Gaza and to Palestinians in Israel and Free Palestine. But that wasn't really the case. There was a lot of defense for what they did. I'm not saying that all of the organizations were defending them, but I think it was very, there was a lot of it, too much of it, and it was very unsettling, honestly. Eliza, what do you think about UF's response to what happened on October 7th? And you specifically, and also another question for you is specifically as a poli-sci major, there's kind of that stereotype of poli-sci majors being, you know how poli-sci majors kind of be. They've always got their opinions on things like that.
Yeah, what has it been like for those other students? And have you had any discussions?
And being in that environment, how has that kind of been?
It's actually interesting. Well, I've tried to keep quiet about it in class because I don't want to ignite a fire. And I realize that people are using what Hamas did as ammunition towards their cause. So I don't want to be getting into these severe political debates in my classroom. But I will say that I had asked my political science teacher if I could be excused to go to the march in D.C. And I was figuring that she would say yes because we were actually learning about Nazi history and about World War II and everything that happened. So when I went up to her and I asked, can I please be excused to go on this march for Israel? And she said no. I was shocked because I was like, if my political science teacher, that's supposed to be very open to all of these views and hearing everyone's opinions, and we're actually learning about the past and how it shouldn't repeat itself, is telling me no to my face, that I can't be excused to do what I think is important to me and is a bigger issue right now than sitting in class for school. That kind of shocked me because I'm like, this was my only sliver of hope that someone would be accepting of like my beliefs and what I have to go do because I feel it's right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also my previous question as well. I mean, what do you think about the University of Florida's response to what happened on October 7th?
I think it's one of the best responses of any university in the United States. My parents are constantly telling me how grateful they are that I go here because they know that I feel safe here, because I do. Despite any of the protests that I see, I feel like the school has my back. I feel like they want to protect me and they want to protect their Jewish students. So I think it's one of the best responses, and I think every university should be following in Ben Sass's footsteps.
That's really awesome. And what was that class specifically that you were talking about?
It was Western European politics.
Western European politics. Yeah, that's really interesting. And like you said about your parents being so supportive of you being here, I was at the gym over winter break, and this guy comes up to me. I was wearing my Gators Stand with Israel shirt that we got when we went to D.C., and this guy comes up to me, and he's like, how is everyone's like asking me like coming up to me and like asking like how's the anti-Semitism there, how is it, like even like one of my rabbis from like school like was calling me and asking, and they sound so happy that like I'm here, that compared to anywhere else, because of their response and because of how supportive they are. So, I think it definitely resonates with a lot of Jews here, how supportive the University of Florida has been to us.
Yeah. Okay, wait. I'm kind of curious because we're talking about education, like the universities, and I just kind of want to hear your take on this, Eliza, about what is the problem, and this is like the broadest question ever, but I just the most shocking thing to me and the most scary thing to me is just it seems that education, especially about history, and it's been for a while, we've just completely failed our generation completely in terms of education.
Yeah.
It seems that I'm using broad terms here, but Americans, like young Americans, are just so close-minded, and they don't really focus on anything outside of the United States. And when they focus on something outside of the United States, they look at it through the lens of the United States.
Yeah.
So what is your take on all this?
I have a lot of opinions.
And I want to hear them.
Okay, I actually just watched a TED Talk the other day.
Okay.
And it was this guy, I'm forgetting his name, but he was explaining how our opinions get twisted and I'm forgetting the word he used, but he said, when we hear about mass conflict, and let's say you hear a number of 1,000 people, that number is too big to comprehend. So instead of
I've seen this one.
Instead of us thinking that we can do something about it, we turn a blind eye and walk away because we say, that's too big of an issue, we can't fix it. So he was saying how he did this experiment where there was a poster of a girl and she needed food, and it was like, how many people will donate to this girl? It's like she lost her family, she needs food. Okay, a bunch of people donated. Then they tried another experiment where they put the girl and then they put statistics next to it of like 2,000 other girls are also like this. The donations halved because people were like, this number is too big to comprehend. And I think the issue here is that people are saying, 20,000 Gazan civilians. Well, that number is huge, and I don't even know how to process that. I don't know what to do with that information. So I think that the fact that the Israeli government is taking time to talk about each individual person's stories, that's helping educate people. But I think that people are too scared. Like, we see big numbers and then we run away because we're like, I can't fix this problem. I can't do anything about it. And the issue also is the fact that you're right. People are closed-minded. They don't want to learn. They're not interested, and you could say that with just about everything, like anything in politics. Like, I was watching the Republican debates. Like, if I didn't watch it with an open mind, I could say, I support this candidate regardless of what they say. And a lot of people do that because they're like, I'll fight for him. I'll believe whatever he says. The issue is that, like, these are our formative years. We're in college. If you don't take the time now to teach people, about formulating these opinions and actually learning, it's going to be an issue in the long run. And another issue with that is that Jewish students feel unsafe. There's a difference between how our protests are peaceful and how I'm not threatening anyone when I voice my opinions, whereas my sister feels threatened when other people are voicing their opinions or almost banging down the library doors. There was a video at NYU where they almost banged down the door because they were screaming, and I feel like I'm rambling on kind of now, but it upsets me because I feel like there's a huge issue with educating people and then also understanding the difference between a peaceful protest and like what's allowed, what should be allowed on campus. You can voice your opinions however you like as long as everyone around you feels safe, and that's the main issue here is Jews don't feel safe on campus. So how do you educate the masses and let them know what's a peaceful protest? What even are you protesting? A lot of them don't even know what people are saying from the river to the sea. What river and what sea? Half of them don't know.
Right,
Like,
yeah, there was that Wall Street Journal article about. Did you read that article?
I didn't know.
Where this guy, he polled like a few hundred students from a variety of backgrounds who were saying the river to the sea, and he asked all of them to say which river and which sea it was, and I think it was like a 60% of them changed their stance and said that they wouldn't say from the river to the sea anymore after looking at the map and seeing what the river to the sea is. So, I mean, that gives you hope. Like, I think it's just, but when you were talking about the numbers, but people do care. You said, like, when there's such a large number, people don't know what to do with that number. But they're on the street. Like, people do care. They're very passionate about this issue.
I think something else with that is people use the numbers to their advantage. So when it's a huge number, like, oh my goodness, the Israeli government is responsible for the deaths of thousands of Gazan civilians. Okay, then they're going to use that as their ammunition and say, this number is huge and look at what they're doing. But then, let's say it's flipped. They're like, oh, the numbers are too big. And I just think people are using the information they're given and then using it as ammunition to twist their narrative, which is another big issue because half of the numbers you're seeing on the internet are false. And another issue with that is I always think every time I drive past a pro-Palestine protest, I know in my heart, I'm like, what are they saying? I don't agree. All I think about when I drive past those are, what about the people in their cars who haven't formulated an opinion yet, who are listening, who are opening their windows and listening and saying, wait, I think that they're right. I think that I could side with. That's what really bothers me the most is the people who either haven't formulated their opinions yet or are just like listening to propaganda or just like, that's what upsets me the most is I don't, regardless of how unsafe I may feel that there's a protest going on at the corner of my apartment, like the corner across the street, what is like upsetting me the most is the people walking past listening to it because I'm like, what are they taking from that?
But Levi, on your whole thing about people care about this large number, I mean, right now I think there's, according to the Hamas Health Ministry, I think there's about 23,000 Palestinians who've died since this conflict started. Is this number actually really big? Because let's compare this to World War II, right? I mean, I watched, over winter break, I watched a World War II documentary with my dad, and one of the things that they did was they bombed the German cities. So for Germans to lose confidence in this war and to pressure the Nazis to be like, stop it, we're all dying here, like it's not worth it anymore. One of the places that they bombed was Hamburg, Germany. In one night.
Or you mean Dresden? Do you mean Dresden?
No, I'm talking about Hamburg.
Okay.
The Allies killed in bombings. They killed 45,000 civilians in one night. Okay. The next night they bombed them again, 65,000 civilians. Is 23,000 really that big of a number? And you could say, well, let's compare the numbers here. There's a lot more Germans than people in Gaza. Well, in Gaza, it's way more dense. The density is huge. And the fact that there's only 23,000 deaths, I would say, is a miracle. And I would say it is a testament to how much Israel really cares about the safety of innocent civilians in this war.
I disagree with that though. Okay, in my opinion. Well, okay, so you're bringing up cases, and it is true. And Tokyo, which we didn't talk about, like, yeah, World War II, and I think people have this tendency to put everything into another. Every conflict, every situation is its own situation, right? So World War II, people try to compare this conflict, and they're like, this is, one of the most destructive conflicts that we've ever seen in human history. I don't. That's not true. I don't think. I think the death toll is remarkably high right now.
Yeah.
It's much higher than any other conflict with, Israel and Gaza, or any Palestinian-Israeli conflict, I think, in history. I don't know how many people died in the 1948 war. I know 1% of the Israeli population at the time died. So probably since 1948, this is the largest loss of life. I do think that there's that hypocrisy when the people who only care about this death toll, obviously this death toll is lower than other Middle Eastern conflicts, right? Syria, more deaths. Yemen, right. And we can get
Turkey,
into the Yemen
Iran.
situation later because that's something that's going on right now.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a problem with, talking about the tragedy of the high death toll in Gaza and not going to absolutes, because what we have now is South Africa bringing Israel to the International Criminal Court. Is that just the International Criminal Court? For charges of genocide. And it's not true that Israel is committing genocide. And I think that arguments like that actually hurt the Palestinian cause, because that's just not true. And I don't think Israel is going to be found guilty of genocide at the International Criminal Court. I did watch most of the proceedings, and South Africa doesn't really have a strong case in that matter. I don't know have you guys been keeping up with that?
Yeah.
I actually have a thought on this.
Okay.
Whenever someone says to me, or I hear the statement of Israel's committing genocide, so many people have died in Gaza, this is the one thing that I always ask them. I go, can you give me another solution? Can you tell me what else should Israel be doing? Can you tell me what should they be doing better? Just because that I support Israel's right to exist doesn't mean I support all their government's politics, and that's another thing. But what else? What's another solution? What's another solution than trying to warn people in that area to flee, trying to save our hostages? You call for a ceasefire now, but we still have people. It's day 100, and they're still in tunnels in Gaza being held captive. So can you give Israel another solution? Because this is what bothers me the most, is when people are so quick to just attack Israel, and then they're speechless when asked, can you tell us what we should be doing instead? Because I'm open to solutions, and I want to hear people's thoughts of what else should Israel be doing? Can you just tell me another solution? And people are left speechless because you know what? Right now, this is the best thing we can think of doing. The truth is that in war, there's going to be casualties. Innocent people are going to die. That's just how it's going to happen. It's happening in Israel. It's happening in Gaza. It's happening in every war that ever existed. But how Israel's going about it is extremely careful. And yes, there are things they could be doing differently. Every government has, there are critiques for every government, but I am still struggling to hear one viable solution that's different from what's happening right now. And any person I ask can't come up with anything. They're just left speechless because I'm right.
Yeah, there's some who say, oh, well, just use commandos. And you're essentially telling Israel that they should, just send more of their people to die. And by the way, Israel is right now sending soldiers to die. I think almost 200 have been killed since the start of this war. If they wanted, they could have just, bombed and not sent any soldiers in. In terms of the bombing, and I think people act when they say they act like Israel just flies planes, the IDF just flies planes over the Gaza Strip and just drops bombs, it just does runs over it. The situation is that people don't ask the questions about Hamas has such a hold over this area. It's actually remarkable. I mean, they have more miles of tunnels than the New York City subway system, and they fired almost 14,000 rockets in the past 3 months. So they have more than 14,000 rockets in an area that's the size of Queens.
Yeah.
And that money is all from international aid. And people don't ask that question. I mean, just think about that for a second. How crazy is that? Almost over 10,000 rockets stored underground, and they're stored under hospitals. They're stored in mosques. Pretty much everywhere that the IDF is going into in Gaza, they're finding weapons. In pretty much every other house that they're finding them. The loss of life is just horrific. Like Eliza said, I'm not a military expert. I don't know what other advice I would give to the IDF. They drop leaflets. They've they of course started and then telling the citizens to move from the north to the south. My only hope now is that now that the IDF has kind of established a large position on the ground, that the death toll is going to dramatically lower in the next few months. We're past that high intensity phase, so I think it will, hopefully more humanitarian aid can get in. But at the end of the day, now they're holding out in the south in that Rafah area.
Levi, I want to go back to your point about what we were discussing before about, me comparing what's going on now to kind of what happened with the Allies in Germany.
Yeah.
First of all, I mean, obviously every death in war is tragic, but civilian death in war is inevitable, especially urban warfare war, and especially in a war like this, where Hamas is using civilians as human shields and putting their tunnels under mosques, hospitals, schools, etc. I don't understand your point about what's wrong with comparing something like this to something like World War II. I mean, I think it's important to be comparing times in history because we learn our lessons from history. And what the biggest problem is right now is the disproportionate critique on Israel right now and how Israel is disproportionately being attacked for just defending their country. So, I mean, can you explain yourself a little bit more? Can you just elaborate on your point?
Yeah, no, my point, sorry. I think when I meant I disagreed, I was meaning that I disagree that this is a low number just in the context of this conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In this conflict, it's a really high number. But you are right. I have made the comparisons to World War II, especially. And so, yeah, I do agree with you that things need to be looked at through that historical lens. I didn't disagree with that point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I have to add about that. Well, did I answer that? Did I answer?
100%,
Okay. 100%. I didn't know if what more I had to add.
I completely. That makes sense.
Okay.
Definitely 100%. And it's a high number. I'm not going to get it wrong, but compare it to historical context, it's honestly a miracle that there haven't been more civilian deaths in Gaza, in my opinion. But
and the number is, so we keep saying it's provided by the Hamas Ministry of Health.
Yeah.
So Israel claims that they've killed almost 10,000 terrorists.
Yeah.
You can believe that number or not. I don't have any way. I believe I'm taking the death toll number. I'm going to believe that 23,000. Usually the numbers are correct in terms of these conflicts from the Gaza Ministry of Health.
Yeah.
This is a much larger toll than usual, and there have been those instances where there have been lies about the death toll. The hospital bombing was one of them. So, but for now, I'll take that number. I'll believe that number. And I don't know how many terrorists are in that number. You have something to add?
Yeah. Really okay. This is a little controversial, but I feel like I have to say it, is that just because you're a civilian living in Gaza doesn't mean you're innocent. And I feel like a lot of people tend to think, okay, just because they're not a part of Hamas, that, it's terrible that they were killed. That is true, but at the same time, I listened to Mia Shem. She was held hostage in a regular family's home in Gaza with a wife, a father, and children. And she was staying in a room with the husband, and the mother would deny her food because she was jealous that she was staying in the same room as her husband. The kids would go into the room and open bags of candy in front of her. I listened to her whole hour interview, how she'd be sitting in the room. The little kids would go into her room, open a bag of candy or food in front of her so she could see it and smell it, and then run away. And I'm not saying that, it's these kids' fault. I am saying that people are indoctrinating them young into these ideologies, and just because you're not technically a part of Hamas, or a lot of these hostages were kept in what we're calling innocent civilians' homes. So how can we determine who's really an innocent civilian living in Gaza? Because I do believe that there are actual innocent civilians living there, and people who are aiding Hamas and abetting their crimes, but aren't technically a part of Hamas.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes it tough, because a lot of the hostages are being kept at civilian homes, as we know, and a lot, unfortunately, participated as well in the October 7th. In fact, that second wave was the most brutal in terms of the killings, because there was the first wave when the Hamas came in, and then, once the barrier was broken, the civilians came in. It's just indoctrination, We see it in history. There's just such a radicalization that can happen we have a lot of people to blame for this. One of them, the biggest one, I would say, is UNRWA, the United Nations organization. That should be just completely torn down after this war. I don't know what.
I mean, like we talked about in our last episode, they have contributed, and a lot of their teachers have even taught anti-Israel and anti-Semitic propaganda. So, like you said, it is a huge contributing factor, and a lot of people say that, oh, well, Israel is radicalizing these Palestinians. I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, look at what they're teaching in their own schools. I saw on Instagram they had a puzzle set in these schools of like quote unquote Palestine, and then all around it were like people holding Palestinian flags and guns and shooting people and stuff on like the puzzle. I mean, it's literal indoctrination over there, and obviously it's very hard to tell who's innocent, who's not innocent, because it's not black and white when it comes to that. And I hate to keep going back to like World War II, but we always talk about how the civilians under Nazi rule, they weren't entirely innocent. We always say that they're complicit in what happened, and I think the same is true here. I think the Palestinian civilians are complicit, and I think that like you said with the hostages, and even doctors were holding hostages too, and contributing to this massacre. I think a lot of Palestinians are complicit in this, and it's really sad that they are, because it's not really their fault. It's Hamas's fault, but I think that the world is being so hypocritical, because when it came to World War II, they were so much on the side of it's really sad that all these German civilians were killed, but a lot of them were complicit in this, so it had to be done. But now for this, they're saying no, that's not the case, and the hypocrisy is very blood boiling right now.
Yeah, I guess my question would be, how does that change the way that a war is conducted?
I don't think it does.
It shouldn't, right?
It shouldn't change the way that the work is conducted.
Yeah, because people, have those critiques for Dresden, because Dresden was not a military target. It was just a city.
Neither was Hamburg.
Yeah, right. And, I mean, the argument is also that wasn't really an effective bombing, because there were way better places that they could bomb, supply depots,
so there's two things.
Train stations.
There's two things, too, that I really learned from this documentary that I watched. That one is that innocent civilian deaths are completely inevitable when it comes to war. And two, mistakes happen in war. They showed a lot of that. Mistakes happened where they thought they were bombing like a military stronghold, when it actually was a place where civilians were going to shelter and hide. And the big contrast here is that despite the fact that Israel is only targeting Hamas here and places where they're holding weapons and tunnels and stuff like that, and yes, it happens to be that Palestinian civilians died because of that, they're still putting so much more scrutiny on Israel than on the Allies, which they shouldn't put any scrutiny on the Allies, because they won the war and they defeated the Nazis, and they freed the Jews who were in the concentration camps. They're still putting even more scrutiny and saying that Israel is a terrorist state and Israel is being genocidal, which is not the case. And I think that what we were talking about earlier before about we have this Western world lens, I think it's so important that we have to break free of that, because we've never experienced being in a war zone before, right? Yeah, we've experienced contributing to war, like World War I, not us, but our ancestors or grandparents, great-grandparents, but we've never experienced what it's like to actually be in a war zone.
Yeah, and since 1812.
Yeah, and the people in Israel and the people in Gaza and the West Bank, they have experienced that, and I think we really need to be able to break free of that lens.
Well, how do we break free of the lens?
That's a good question. Eliza, do you have any thoughts on that?
I actually have one thing to say. I feel like everything you were saying ties back into what Levi was saying before and what I was saying about how people are just taking information and using it to fit the narratives that they already believe. So any statistic that comes out, everyone's like, oh, Israel's the bad guy. Israel did it. Well, what if you take a step back and act like we live in this century where we have Google on our phones. I always talk about this with my dad. Any question I have, I can look it up. And I can find a reliable source and I can do my research. We're on our phones 24/7. Why are you so complicit? Why can't you just, if you have a question, just look it up or ask your friend? Why is everyone And I know I'm just asking all these why questions, but to me it's really bothersome because we're taught in school about researching and looking up and asking questions. So when it comes to a conflict that actually affects you personally, if you have a question, why can't you just look it up on your phone and find the answer for yourself instead of using it to fit your narrative? And then that's affecting, like I said, when people are on the corner protesting. I mean, that's just feeding people's brains with false information as you drive past them.
Well, Eliza, you could use the internet and you could use that to fit into your narrative. I mean, a lot of the reason why people are so outraged right now is because of the sheer number and volume of deaths right now. And yes, you could look at statistics, you could look at numbers, but it's the context that's really going to hit at home. And I don't think that the internet provides good context into statistics and numbers. Look at the New York Times. Look at the Washington Post. They're writing all these articles and they're talking about the numbers and everything like that. But the context is key. And I think you could, yes, Google is an amazing tool and the internet is an amazing tool, but you need to be able to understand the context. And I think that just goes further than just typing something into your search browser and finding a number or finding something about it. So I understand what you're saying. And I think that, yes, people are not doing their due research, and I think they're kind of just following. They're just kind of trying to fit things into their narrative, and they're just kind of like blindly following the people that they've looked up to for a very long time. But I think that it just goes a lot further than that, if that makes any sense.
No, I think you're right. I think it's a greater issue that just can't really be solved. At least, like, my own brain can't solve that issue. That you're right. People are going to look things up, and my point about Google is that if you really take the time to go on your computer and you want to find an answer to something, you can find an unbiased, correct answer about just about anything.
Yeah.
But it's a matter of looking it up in an unbiased perspective, and you have to start with an open mind. You can't start with a perspective already. So if I look something up and I think in my head that Israel's right about everything, then Israel's right about everything regardless of what I see. But if I look up something and I'm open-minded and I really want to learn, which really barely anyone is, that's the issue, is no one's looking things up with an already open mind. We already have opinions and we just want to fit our narrative. That's what's like fueling the fire here.
Well, the reason I'm on my phone right now, I want to pull up a text that somebody sent me. And this, I've been texting Mayor. I stopped texting Mayor, but this is the last thing he sent me and it's on your point. Yes, we need to be able to read from people who give an unbiased perspective on this. In one of the books I'm reading, it's called Reclaiming Israel's History by David Brog. And David Brog, he's an evangelical Christian Zionist. And yeah, that like has kind of like a negative connotation to it.
I mean, you're right. I think that when you tell me that, I think I have a negative.
Yeah, it has a negative connotation to this, but I think you need to, like you were saying about like the Republican debates, right? You really need to have like an open mind when reading these things or watching these things. And this book, I've been listening to it, it's an audiobook, has been so, I don't think I've read anything so intelligent on this conflict and so unbiased. It really is very unbiased. And basically, I recommended it to Mayor because Mayor recommended me the book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine by Ilan Pappé. And so I said, look, I'll look at it, I'll read it. After I'm done reading the things that I've got on my plate right now, because
you can move that book down a little bit.
whatever that may be. And so basically, I recommended it, and he says, "I'll be frank. I'm not reading the work of an evangelical Christian Zionist lobbyist and taking it as truth. Just reading some book reviews tells me I'm definitely not going to be impressed by the quote history there. While I'll admit Pape isn't the best either and does a bunch of stuff sloppy in his book, he's an academic, his goals aren't that large. If you also reject the source, I can recommend plenty more, even some primary materials if you'd prefer that." So I think what he says is exactly what you were saying. I think people are just so rigid in where they get their information from, right? And of course, you got to take that into consideration that he's a Christian evangelical Zionist, but read the book, at least the introduction. The introduction is what really, really hit me hard. Like, you wouldn't even tell that this guy is a Christian evangelical Zionist. Like, it seemed like he was more on the left side, honestly. So I think that it's so important to get like a wide variety of sources and perspectives on this. And I think when it comes to like the pro-Palestinian side of it, I don't think they are. And I am following so many people on Instagram, so many Arab Muslims from Yemen, from United Arab Emirates, who tell their story about how they were so anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic because of the indoctrination that they received in schools. And once they really started reading the other side, they were like, wait, this makes so much sense. And they give so much context and history here, and it really opens your eyes. So I think that if we really create a culture of being able to accept the other side and to really, you don't have to always agree, but really just be open-minded to their perspectives, it could really cause a lot of change here.
I completely agree with that. I have always said that I think civil discourse is the only way to make progress. It's the only way. If you can't sit with someone and maybe you disagree with their opinions, but okay, if someone sends me an article to read, I'm going to read it because I want to know their stances. I want to know their thoughts. Maybe it might change my opinion, but maybe it might not. And again, like going back to my dad, he always tells me this, that if he's disagreeing with someone, let's say it's about like gun laws or something, and so his friend is pro owning a gun and my dad is not. His friend will send him articles about why he believes that. And my dad won't shut it down and say, oh, I disagree with that. You're wrong. He'll read it.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't change his opinion, but it'll open his mind to why people are voting for certain people, why people are thinking a certain way. That's important because if you don't have those arguments or you don't have those conversations, people are just going to be stuck in their like ways and stuck in their mindsets.
100%. And also, for context, Mayor Shawkat is the president of Jewish Voices for Peace at the University of Florida. And in what you said, I 100% agree. I think that goes true for this specifically. When you kind of just, it's all about just like pushing your argument and not really, you need to have the conversations where it's like, I don't agree with you, but I'm open to seeing where you're coming from in order so that we could both grow from this. This holds true for political discussions, for international relation discussions, for relationships, romantical or friendship discussions. I mean, I've experienced this for everything. So I think exactly what you're saying is so true, that we need to have social discourse that where we're able to be open-minded and we're able to fully embrace what the other person is going through, so that and believe, so that we could both grow and we could and hopefully the world could be better by doing that.
I also just wanted to say really quickly that I have been guilty of doing that, like 100%, where I don't care what someone else has to say and I just want to push my narrative. And there's a lot of times where I notice that you're having a conversation and then let's say someone's responding to you, but you're not listening. You're just thinking about how you're going to respond to them. And I think that's something everyone who's listening, everyone can work on, because I've went through things where someone's telling me something I disagree with and I don't care. I don't want to listen. I know I think I'm right. That's also an issue within myself, like just like you were saying. Like, I think it's important that everyone starts with an open mind, and even if you already have your opinion and you don't think it's going to change, just listen and don't be thinking when someone's speaking, oh, I already know how I'm going to respond and it's not going to be nice. Like, maybe they do have a point, or maybe I see where they're coming from, or maybe I understand why they think the way they do, and that might change the way I think and it might not. But regardless, like, the conversation we're having is equally important.
I mean, I just feel like it's become like a sports, like people are supporting sports teams almost when it comes to conflicts. Like,
yeah, the diehards.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be people that have no skin in the game, and you pick a side, and it's like you don't have any room to mourn innocent civilians on both sides. You don't have any room to see flaws in other sides, and it's just like you're so set in your ways. And I'll give you an example, because so we've spoken about the situation with the Houthis in Yemen on this podcast many times. Yeah. And for months now they've been attacking civilian trade ships, not Israel ships, by the way. There were Indian ships, British ships, like just random ships, and it will affect the global economy because ships have to redirect their routes.
Yeah.
So the U.S. said many times, they said, listen, stop doing this, stop doing the pirating on the seas. And they just kept doing it, and they kept telling them stop. And then finally the other day, the U.S. and a few other countries did airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen. And now you have the teams, there were people protesting in New York City, protesting in support of the Houthis.
Yeah.
And by the way, they have no idea what they're talking about. They go, their chant is Yemen, Yemen, turn another ship around. It's not Yemen. I mean, it's the Houthis. They're not they only control a portion of Yemen. Unfortunately, they do control a sizable portion. They seem to be winning. They've been winning a civil war there. This is a group that has slavery. They have slavery, like genuine slavery. It's a terrorist organization. We have people in New York City just chanting for them just because they're like, opposed to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's ridiculous.
And talking about creating their own narratives, they're making it seem like the U.S. and UK and the other countries were literally bombing like civilians.
Right, 5 people died, and they were all Houthis.
They literally just bombed like the Houthis and weaponry and whatever it was that they bombed. It's just so.
In fact, they told them. They said in the morning of the day, the U.S. made an announcement. There was a leak, not a leak. The U.S. leaked it to the press that said there will be strikes on the Houthis tonight. Yeah. So they moved all they could away. So they just bombed like runways and radar facilities and stuff. I mean, there's no better way to handle a situation like that.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show just how much it doesn't matter the context or it doesn't matter the truth. They're just going to be pushing their whole agenda and creating a narrative where it just makes it seem like Israel is the bad guy and Jews are the bad guys and
right.
And yeah, it's ridiculous. I don't even know.
It doesn't matter because of, let's say Israel's found not guilty of genocide at the International Criminal Court. Do you think the people still in the streets chanting that Israel's committing genocide are going
100%.
to stop chanting?
100%.
No. And more about that, the genocide case, a lot of it is quotes. In the case, it quotes pretty much most of the evidence is statements made by government members like Itamar Ben-Gvir, Bezalel Smotrich. These are extremist leaders in Israel. And also it quotes a singer. In the South African case, it quotes something that a singer said. Like a singer in Israel, I forget which one, said, like, wipe Gaza off the map. These statements, this is not how you prosecute a genocide case at the International Criminal Court, by bringing statements from singers. Now, there is a problem in the Israeli government, and I've said this many times before, with extremism. And yes, they are saying genocidal rhetoric. I mean, we see that that's happening. But the IDF is not acting under the command of Itamar Ben-Gvir. Yeah. Right? He doesn't. His job is not a real job. Even it's like a make-up job they made up a job for him to do. Mm-hmm. It's the national security minister, but it's not even a real thing. But
I mean, I don't think it really doesn't help Israel's case.
Doesn't help at all. It's the reason that they're there.
Well, it really doesn't help Israel's case when they say a lot of this genocidal rhetoric, even though they're not committing genocide. It's just kind of what they say, and because of the extremism in the government, a lot of the citizens in Israel are kind of, I guess, adopting this kind of genocidal rhetoric. And a way I could kind of describe it is with Trump and a lot of the things that he said, and it's caused a lot of people who've already kind of had those thoughts in their head to kind of just be more open about it. But at the same time, that's not what's happening. Yes, you could look at like what some citizens are saying and some people are saying, but you got to look at what is actually happening. I mean, obviously, like I hope like Bibi and Ben-Gvir are like literally kicked out of the government after this because I think they're horrible. But
yeah, in my opinion, today would be
today. I mean, yesterday, honestly, a lot of the things he said don't help the Israeli cause.
Yeah,
really,
I would
and
agree.
That's why I think again he needs to go. However, it's not genocide. I mean, I think it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I disagree with the characterization. Thoughts on anything that we've been saying? Sorry, we've been on like a little bit of a...
No, it's okay. I think he needs to go. That's my thoughts.
Oh, okay.
I just don't like him, and goodbye. I don't like him at all.
Benjamin.
Well, on this point, Levi, do you think you could talk a little bit about the Israel class that you're in? Because it kind of ties into it. Because I think there's something that Roy Holler said. I'm not in the class. I want you to talk about your class. Something that Roy Holler says is that, like, I think he said something about, like, I would join in these, like protests about, like, Bibi and, like, Ben-Gvir and stuff like that. Like, can you just, like, talk about that, I guess, a little bit?
Well, I mean, the only thing he was talking about that raised a lot of hairs, I would say, is this professor at University of Florida. He was discussing the situation in the West Bank, and he characterized it as ethnic cleansing. And then he said that the situation in Gaza, northern Gaza, is also ethnic cleansing. I don't disagree with his first characterization in certain aspects, but I do with his second characterization. An evacuation due to a war is not ethnic cleansing until they are. Ethnic cleansing in this situation is kicking Gazans to the Sinai Peninsula. In my opinion, that's what that's what ethnic cleansing would be. Mm-hmm. And there are people echoing that sentiment in the government. It hasn't happened yet, though. In fact, a lot of people from the South have been able to move back to the North in the past few weeks. The West Bank is another situation. People get angry about the West Bank.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I would go as far to agree with him on that position. He had a very, he had a strong position on that, ethnic cleansing in the West Bank.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't exactly agree with that, but I am closer to him than I would be to the other people, if I could say it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You're also in that class. What do you think?
I think we have to be careful throwing those words around. And he's...
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't maybe use that word. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there are examples of it, though. It happens.
Just in general, I didn't really expect him to be so opinionated in class. And I do appreciate that because I really thought going into this class, I didn't really know what to expect. But I kind of thought he was going to take an unbiased standpoint and just listen to what we had to say. So on the first day, I thought it was interesting that he instills his opinions and is sharing them with us. I think that's cool that he feels comfortable to do that. But it worries me a little bit because words like ethnic cleansing that people are really quick to just throw around because they're so terrible and people are like, God forbid, ethnic cleansing, which, yeah, it's terrible, but I feel like you have to be careful the context you use it in, and these words have definitions for a reason, and you're right, I don't really necessarily agree with the way he applied them to certain situations. So I appreciate him sharing his opinions because I really do think it's important to hear, especially from someone who was born in Israel and is also anti-Netanyahu. I think that's cool to hear, how he was willing to say, I would protest him too. I mean, me too. That's what I was doing this summer. But I just think we all need to be careful where we throw around these words because you never know what people are taking from the class too.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I mean, he has the ability to sway my opinions because I'm trying to go into the class with an open mind. So just as he has the ability to change my opinions, I'm curious what everyone in our class is taking from these thoughts, what he's thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to share a lot of opinions like that.
I mean, what were your guys' expectations of the class coming in? I know you guys only had one class so far, but what was the expectation and what was the, I guess, thing that you were most surprised about that you experienced in the class?
I just thought that it was going to be an outlet to discuss our feelings and opinions on what's currently happening and how we feel. That's genuinely just what I thought going into it. I didn't really think it was going to be so historical. I was surprised because the first day he kind of went over some definitions like colonialism and things like that and how people twist those words. And I thought that was interesting because when have I ever sat down and looked up these actual concrete definitions of words people are throwing around? Mm-hmm. I mean, I just wouldn't think to do that because just like we said, sometimes I try to get things to fit my narrative. And when people call it colonialism, for example, I'm just please shut up because you're wrong. So I thought it was interesting that he wanted to break down those words that people use. But I did think that it was going to be more of an outlet to discuss what we were thinking, not necessarily a fact-based kind of historical class, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a fact-based
really?
historical class. Well, I read the syllabus, and I also spoke to the
I guess I did.
This is the only syllabus I've ever read in my history of being a student.
The rest are you have a quiz on it, and you just do Control F.
I know. I wanted to read what we were gonna learn in the class. It's different.
Sorry, Professor Lowe. I used to Control F for your entire quiz.
It's different speakers every week. So I hope that there will be different opinions. But the only thing was I shared something in the class, and he was like, I don't know, I'm not a historian. And I was like, what? I was like, because we were talking about colonialism, and I was saying, well, I don't think that these Jews are colonists on behalf of the British Empire because, there was a large aliyah that happened during when the Ottoman rule was in Palestine at the time. And he's like, yeah, I mean, again, like, I don't know, I'm not a historian. I was like, okay.
Yeah. My girlfriend's in the class, and that's like something that like really stuck up for her. It's like, she thought, it's like an historian gonna come in and that type of thing. And
I am a historian though.
Are you an historian?
Yeah, like an amateur historian. I think so. History is like my favorite. In school, it was my favorite subject.
Yeah,
I love history.
Me too, but I've always had like the worst history worst history teachers. So.
I never liked it in school, which is part of the reason all the kids are not okay anymore because of history.
Would you read it for fun, like on the side? Not for fun, but like
no,
to
for
educate
fun
yourself.
Sometimes for fun. I'm reading an interesting book right now, Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Yeah.
What, you heard about?
Well, because you told me about it like outside of the podcast, but I want the podcast.
Oh, really?
I want our listeners to know about it.
Yeah, it's just pretty interesting. It's like, have you heard of this book?
I've heard of it, yeah.
It's just talking about how like all the civilizations we have now were formed. It's like about I'm trying to explain this because some of it I don't understand, but guns, germs, and steel are like the three things that these huge empires needed to take territory. And his book is basically just asking the question, like, why is it that these empires got the upper hand? Like, why is it that the Europeans were the ones that colonized everything? Like, we were learning about, like, I was reading about, like, the Aztec empire and how the Spanish came with, like, 200 people, and they just, like, conquered the army of, like, 80,000 people. And I had known about that case before, but what I didn't know was that, like, the Aztecs were in the midst of a civil war at the time, and, like, there was a whole conflict. Anyway, it's just an interesting thing because I don't really get that much, like, ancient history anymore. I don't read that much ancient history, so it was pretty interesting.
I like that. It's just it's kind of simplifying, or it's showing how there's kind of, like, three pillars, or there's like three pillars to, like, colonialism, and as to why conquering another nation can be so easy sometimes.
Yeah, he's like, why did the Aztecs, why were they not the ones to go to Spain and conquer Spain?
Yeah.
Like, why did that not happen in history?
Mm-hmm.
Just interesting to think about.
It is interesting.
But what?
I'm going to read that.
You should, but this guy, he's been talking about corn for like 30 pages.
Corn?
I need to get to another chapter because it's like all talking about farming right now, and I can't do it. I can't. I'm just trying to get through the pages.
I love that. We'll drop a link to the book in the bio. And something on the bio, something that came up. Shout out my grandfather. He's kind of an amateur Spotify user, so he needed a little help with this. When you're going to the bio, guys, okay, make sure there's a see more button. Okay, press see more to see a lot of the links because it only shows like the first portion of the bio when you're looking at it. Make sure you're pressing that button so you can see the entire bio. To see the links, to see the donation button right at the bottom. Hint, hint, for anyone who wants to help to support us. Donate now.
No, that's a joke. Well, it's not a joke, but we don't need donations.
We don't need donations, but it'd be nice to help support the podcast. Anyways, yes, just a little heads up about that. And also, I want to drop the link to that TED Talk. Are you in the Hazards in Humans class? The Quest 2, is that where you...
I'm in a Quest 2, but it's not that one. It's about happiness.
Oh, okay, because that's the one. I was in a Quest 2, and they showed us
Really?
that at TED Talk. So
I have to take a Quest too. I haven't taken one yet.
Hazards in Humans, it's pretty easy.
It's
I'm
good?
not gonna lie.
Okay. Are we wrapping up here, by the way?
Yeah, let's wrap up.
I wanted to just because we didn't really talk about the hostages like at all on the podcast, so just making just feel like we should mention it that now today is 100 days.
Day 100.
I think the number is 136.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Still have women and young children who are part of the 136, specifically the Bibas family, and among other who have been brutally sexually assaulted and raped, and we're hoping and praying that they are going to get home safely. So on that note, thank you guys for listening. We're sorry that we took a little bit of a while to post our next episode. Thank you, Eliza, for joining us.
Anything to add?
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we really appreciate you joining us and giving us your perspective. And yeah, guys, have a great rest of your day, and we appreciate you listening.
Thank you.
Bye.